All right, cool. Um, anyway, yeah. So I just wanted to mention that briefly. I think that that's just going to be something that you should watch out for. Just making sure that you're kind of giving yourself enough time to really hear the space between the notes, and just making sure that you're not starting things early, coming off of kick sliders especially. That's like a very common tendency. So just something to be aware of moving forward. But yeah, I
For
think that
sure.
we can go ahead and just kind of jump into these questions that you prepared. Um,
All right.
so if we want to go ahead and start with the first one, first one asking about how to get better finger control. So I think that is actually like in a very similar vein to that idea of hearing the space between the notes. And are you familiar with the concept of subdividing in music?
No, I'm not.
Okay. So I'm gonna stream my game really quickly and just go ahead and show you this. Okay. So let's go to something pretty straightforward. So basically, the idea of subdividing is just that you have the beat. So this song, for example, 150 BPM, right? And then if you're subdividing every beat, maybe you're tapping twice, maybe you're tapping 3 or 4 times. But the point is that you're trying to just get it as even as possible, right? This is a really important concept in music theory, right? Where you just have to be aware of kind of the value that each note has, if you will. So if you look at, a common stream is going to be 1/4 subdivision, right? It's going to be 4 taps for every one beat. And then, jumps are usually 1/2 in the editor. So those would be two taps per beat, right? Um, so I think it's just kind of important to really take a look at this on maps where you feel like you're struggling to get good accuracy. I would definitely recommend looking in the editor and just kind of seeing like is this 1/4, is this 1/2, like what is the subdivision there, and then also on sliders like this you can even look at this and say, okay, I mean this has the same value as 4 notes, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so just being aware of kind of how all of those things are going to tie together, and most like the vast majority of songs that you're gonna play are going to be divided into groups of 2 or 4, in terms of how many notes you're tapping per beat. So you will encounter other things like 3 and 6 and multiples of 3 too, but especially the things that you're playing right now, it's mostly going to be in groups of 2 and 4. So I think just being aware of that and really getting used to, trying to hear those subdivisions in your head, even if they're not necessarily, being played out on the map, um, is going to help you a lot. So I would definitely recommend. This may sound kind of strange, but even like just outside of gameplay, maybe if you're just like listening to music or just whatever, anytime that you're listening to music going about your day-to-day life, like if you can try just tapping along to the beat and then try to double time it, maybe 2 taps per beat, just tap on your leg or on a desk, or it doesn't matter. But I think just really trying to internalize, that rhythm sense is going to be really important for you, and it's a very like fundamental skill that's just going to help you more and more the earlier you learn it. So I think that that's probably the big thing to focus on there, and I think that the finger control aspect of that will come kind of in conjunction with that. As you start to understand these rhythms better. You'll have an easier time if you can really. You mentioned like having trouble streaming low BPM. I think if you are able to really hear those subdivisions and like get to the point where you can hear every individual note, that will just help you a lot, and then you can just sync your fingers to that. Um,
Makes
so
sense.
and yeah. So any questions about that?
No, not really.
Okay, cool. Um, and feel free at any point during the session if you want to like redirect what we're talking about to something else. If there's something that comes up, it's your hour.
Yeah, for sure.
But cool. So just kind of moving down the list, I see you mentioned that your tapping is worse than your aim. So that is very common. I think that generally aim is like considered to be the most fundamental skill in the game. And then, tapping is kind of the other mechanical skill that you learn. And then those in conjunction is, what kind of makes up your skill cap, right? It's just the idea of like, how many notes can be on the screen, how far apart can they be? And, like, do you have a good chance of hitting them, right?
Yeah.
So those are the first 2 things you're going to develop. I think that a lot of people tend to just have a lot of natural ability for one or the other, either aim or tapping. So if you got aim, that's totally fine. It's honestly, I think that that's the better one to have, just because that skill set is going to transfer into a lot of different things, in the future when you're starting to get into like tech maps or, just really anything. I mean, no matter what you play, it's going to require aim, right? Whereas the having, really fast tapping and really good stamina, you can kind of get away with not having that as much. So, and I think that the meta is shifting a little bit more towards speed. But aim is certainly viable, and it's really just going to be one of those things where you have to kind of just keep playing and experimenting with different play styles, and start to ask yourself, like, what sort of player am I trying to become, right? If you want to be very aim focused, like, that's totally fine, and I think that will generally, like I said, lead into other skill sets that you'll encounter later on as you're playing more difficult maps. But yeah, it's really just a question of how necessary is this skill to learn right now, and if it's not something that you need, then you probably are better off focusing on things that you're already feeling naturally good at. So in your case, that would be the aim. Um, so yeah, but I think just moving on to how to train your stamina. Um, there are a lot of different I guess like schools of thought, if you will, on what the best method is for that. So personally, my approach is to first of all, I'll have you play a map in a second, so I can kind of get a look at your tapping technique, because I think that is really important. And the big bottleneck for a lot of people is going to be that technique. So just making sure that you are tapping correctly and in a way that is going to enable you to like push that your muscles in your forearm, as opposed to tensing up and having your fingers locking up due to tendon strain in your hand. So I'd like to have you go ahead and try. I did watch your Tower of Heaven replay, but I think I'd like to have you try that again, just because that was it seemed like you were struggling with the stamina towards the end. So yeah, I just want to get an idea of how you're tapping this.
Another div?
Yeah, this another should be fine. So I'm gonna turn on my camera really quickly and just show you a couple things. I think your technique is pretty good, but definitely could be improved upon a little bit. Um, are you able to see my camera?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Um, so what I see right now from your tapping hand is that it looks like you're using a lot of the pad of your finger, and your finger, like when it's coming down on some of these streams, your tapping is it's pretty flat. Your finger. So when I talk about technique, I don't like to tell people that they necessarily have to change certain things, because there are a lot of different ways that you can tap, right? A lot of different techniques that people have made work for themselves. But I think that generally speaking, there are certain ways of playing that lend themselves better to having, better stamina. So what I usually recommend, and this is the way that I play, is you really want to get like a pretty good arch with your fingers. And I like to recommend that you also have your wrist resting like pretty close to, pretty close to the base of whatever you're tapping on. So, a keypad in your case. Um, and you really just like, first of all, when you're single tapping or alternating, slower things, that one half, rhythm divisor that we talked about earlier, you really want to just have your wrist being used as a pivot point. And your all of this motion is just like your hand kind of rotating up, if that makes sense. Um, and then streaming, you want to have the same kind of idea, but your wrist should just be resting. You want to be as relaxed as possible, and then all this movement should be coming from your fingers. And I think that if you're able to really get this arch down and have your hand relaxed, what that does is it takes the strain out of this part of your hand and pulls it back into your forearm a little bit more. Um, and this having that strain in your forearm is what you want, because you'll notice that when you start to feel strained, you get kind of like a dull throbbing pain almost in your forearm. And it's very similar if you've ever done any sort of like weightlifting or anything like that. Like it's a very physical limit that you're pushing as you're training stamina. So you want to make sure that you have that kind of that dull throbbing feeling after you play stamina for a while. That means that you're pushing, right? It means you're doing a good job of challenging yourself. But you definitely want to avoid any sort of like sharp stabbing pains. And usually those will occur in your wrist or in this part of your hand. Um, so definitely just watch out for those as you're training stamina. But yeah, so in terms of what maps to actually play, I usually, I like to think of kind of speed and stamina as two kind of separate things. Um, you really train them both the same way, but I think it's just better to focus on one or the other on a given day. Um, so, stamina is going to be more like death streams. Tower of Heaven's a good example. Whereas speed is more just like, probably like 5 to 9 note bursts, like just as fast as you can, right? Um, so as you're training this, I think it's going to be really important again to just make sure that you're focusing on your technique. The major tendency that I see from a lot of people, and it's the game kind of teaches you to do this, is that when you start to fall behind on streams, most people are going to tense up, right, and try to save their combo, because the game rewards combo. So I think that that's perfectly fine if you are playing in a tournament or you're like just actively trying to FC something. You're playing for a score more than you're playing for improvement, and that in that style. But if you really want to play for improvement, I think it's going to be important for you to focus on maintaining that technique. And so as you start to run out of stamina and the stream, you fall behind, you really just want to let it get away from you. So rather than tensing up and maybe you hit a few extra notes, but then you start missing because you finger lock. You really want to have this feeling of like, okay, you're getting 300s on the stream, now 100s, now 50s, and now you're missing, right? So just kind of let it get away from you and just focus a lot on maintaining that proper form. One other thing that I would recommend about technique, if you can with your setup, it's good to have your elbow resting on something. And if that can be the same height as your table, that is optimal. So for me, I kind of like tilt my keyboard slightly. That way I can like have my arm out to the side resting. Um, but it's going to be one of those things you probably just kind of have to experiment with,
Yeah,
and
because I have it on
see.
my chair arm and it's a little lower. I'd say like
Yeah,
maybe 6 inches lower.
yeah, that's probably a bit too much difference, because you don't want your arm to be, you don't want to have your wrist
That's kind
floating.
of what it does.
Right. Yeah. So, however, you have to like angle your setup, in order to fix that. And it's okay if your elbow isn't supported, but as long as like the majority of your arm is supported, I would say you're getting the same effect there. But yeah, if possible, you want something under your elbow. Um, so Another thing that I would say about training speed and stamina, I really like to go through number ones of just known speed and stamina players. My personal favorite is Haga1115. I'll go ahead and send you a link to his profile. First of all, he has a lot of number ones, so there are a lot of maps for you to choose from. Um, but he's kind of known for being very good at finger control, very good at speed. So I think that you'll find a lot of really interesting maps just by looking through there. And then, do you have the Fun Orange Osu trainer installed?
The fun orange Osu. I have Osu trainer. I don't know if it's that one.
Okay, I think it probably is. It really, the point of it is just to let you rate change beat maps, right?
Oh yeah, that's what.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, so that tool is going to be really valuable for training speed and stamina. Um, you know, again, taking these just these maps from Haga or whoever's profile you're happening to look through, and then you can use the Osu trainer to adjust them to tailor it to your ability. So I think that usually when training speed and stamina, I recommend that you shoot for a target accuracy of somewhere between like 88 to 94 ish. Give or take a couple percent. I think that just that idea of like high B ranks, low A ranks is really where you want to be so that you can see that um, you're pushing, but it's not so far out of your range that you don't get any benefit from it. Yeah, so something like this is maybe a little bit outside of the range, but still viable for sure. You maybe, maybe if you use the OSU trainer to slow this down like 5 or 10 BPM, that would be more in the range that I think you should shoot for. But definitely experiment around with that too and see what feels comfortable. Really, the point is that you're just always challenging yourself in that regard. And I think that for a lot of people, especially if just seem more naturally apt at aim skill sets, the improvement will probably be very slow with speed and stamina. But one thing that I did personally in my own training was I would actually do more than one session in a day on days where I was working on speed and stamina. Um, and so what that looked like is I would kind of, I would get on and warm up and then spend, maybe an hour or so um, just pushing, at the top of my limit, the fastest things that I could play while still falling within that like target accuracy range. And then I would take a like 15 to 20 minute break that was really just long enough for me to lose my warm up. And then I would get back on warm up again and do a second session of, that same thing. And so I think that I always kind of compared that to, again, back to the analogy of lifting weights. If you do like multiple sets on a specific exercise, that's usually a lot more valuable and it pushes your muscles harder than if you were to only do it once in a day. um, so definitely recommend trying that as well, and that's another thing that like you kind of have to experiment with it and just tailor it. How long would you say your play sessions are normally?
Uh, Today, normally maybe like 3 hours.
Okay. Yeah, so that's perfect then. I think that you can make that, multiple session routine fit nicely into a 3 hour time block. Um, so yeah, something to consider. And again, make sure you don't hurt yourself. But
Yeah.
I think that does help a lot having more than one session in a day. Um, yeah. So any other questions about speed stamina training?
No, you pretty much covered everything.
Cool. Okay, moving on. All right, nerves. So nerves are definitely a tricky one. Um, I think that playing tournaments is great to see that you're already kind of getting into that scene. That will help you a lot with working on your nerves. I think another thing that may help you a bit, and I this sometimes like comes off as kind of mean, but I think that it's important to just remind yourself that like the level you're at right now, a year or two down the line, you're going to be playing these maps no problem, right? If you keep pushing.
Yeah.
So I think, just kind of remind yourself like what I'm doing right now is not really even worth getting nervous over, because I can always just come back and fix this score later, right? Um, so I think that, there's kind of, I guess, two different ways to control nerves. So the first one is kind of what I talked about, just really not caring, if possible. But kind of the flip side of that is just being like so overconfident that you're just not even worried about it. It's like I can FC this map in my sleep, like whatever. I can do this whenever I want. So even if that's not necessarily true, just kind of trying to convince yourself of that, I think will help to get rid of those nerves a little bit too. Um, Now, on the other hand of nerves, there's also, we've only talked about ways to kind of try to get rid of nerves. And I think that you'll find like they're never really going to go away. So another big aspect of dealing with that is learning how to kind of cope with that and play with nerves. So I think one of the best things that you can do for yourself is to make practice diffs of like the end of maps. I think you probably on, maps that you're trying to FC, you should have like a certain pattern that, maybe you hit that pattern and then you're going to start to get nervous, right? It's like, oh, okay, now I have a good chance of seeing this map.
Oh
Um,
yeah, definitely.
yeah. So I like to make practice diffs of just the part of the map after that point. And then if you ever get a good run, you get really nervous and shaky, like, maybe you choke that run, but that's fine. So you're going to exit out and then go to that practice diff and practice playing the end of the map while you're shaky. And I think that that will help you a lot. Just, kind of developing muscle memory is going to be really important in that sense.
Sounds like a plan.
Cool. Okay, so next thing, score v2 accuracy. So this is another one where it seems like the game kind of teaches people to play the game wrong. Score v1 does not punish you for hitting sliders out of time. So what a lot of people just get really used to cheesing them and not hitting them in time. They find that they can hesitate and give themselves more time to get their aim, where they want it to be, or just whatever. And so switching to score v2, it's like, okay, now you can't do that anymore because you're going to get punished. You're going to lose accuracy. So honestly, the best way to get used to score v2, like you just have to play everything with score v2. And I think that it's really good that you're already, again, getting into that very early on. Because you probably won't have as hard of a time shaking that habit as people who, wait till they're like top 5K to start playing in tournaments. And it's like, oh my gosh, I've been cheesing sliders for the last 4 years. So I think just definitely if you can, you really just want to push your score v2 ACK until you're getting pretty close to what you might get on a map with score v1 as well. You want those to just be as close as possible, especially on things that are pretty generic, which is going to be, I think, still most of the maps that you're playing at this level, in the like 4 to 5 star range. But yeah, I think that once you get used to that, that idea of not cheesing sliders, that should stay with you forever. And like even going back to score v1, I don't think you'll start doing it again. Usually, you'll just continue to hit the sliders in time. um, but yeah, I think that's what people mean when they say listen to the music, right? Like it's just don't cheese the sliders, right? But obviously that is easier said than done.
Definitely easier said than done.
Yeah. Um, Okay, so how do you have a good tournament mindset? Can you like elaborate a little more on just, what your mindset is currently and, what you're trying to fix about that?
So I played in 3 tournaments so far.
Mhm.
Uh, I haven't qualified for any one of them. So
Okay.
my mindset right now is just in the gutter, and like I get super nervous when I'm playing qualifiers or
Mhm.
any like match. And I don't know like how to calm myself down, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. So I think that like I said, it's really good that you're getting into tournaments early. Um, but I would definitely just try to think of it as just a skill that you're practicing when you sign up for a tournament. Like even if you don't qualify, you're still getting the experience of getting a map pool, practicing it for a week, and then showing up, playing all the maps. You only get one try each, right? Or maybe in some qualifiers you get two, but that's besides the point. um, but just think of it as just another skill that you're training, and you're pretty new, so you're kind of at the base level, and there's nowhere to go but up, right? um but I will say, I mean, my first few tournaments I did not make it out of group stage either, so that was back when groups was kind of a thing instead of qualifiers. And I think that that's just a very common thing. You really can't expect to do well in your first few tournaments. It takes a long time, and I think that as you get more experience, and maybe try to cut yourself a little slack. Like I said, just think of it as a skill you're improving. Maybe that'll help a little bit with the nerves as well. Um, some things that I would recommend, and this kind of ties into one of your later questions about practicing for tournaments. Um, I think that generally you just really want to try to reduce as many variables as you can. So one important thing might be if you have a tournament and the match is going to be at noon, practice playing at noon every day for that week leading up to that match, right? That's one variable you can control. Another one is warming up with the same maps every day. Um, that helps you to just be consistent and like start from the same point at the beginning of every session. Get your aim and your tapping and everything warmed up to the same spot. um, and then I think also just you know the trap that I see a lot of people fall into with tournaments is that they'll practice a map and they'll practice it until they FC it multiple times. But oftentimes they're still like retrying if they miss, right? And that is very detrimental because you don't get to retry in an actual tournament. So what I see a lot of people, they'll have like multiple FCs in their local scores and then they get 400K in the match. And it's like, oh, I bottomed my locals. And it's like, well, you didn't really bottom your locals. You just didn't submit a lot of runs, right? You were just retrying. So I think it's really good. It's really important to not retry and get like a solid spread of scores in your locals. And then you can kind of start to get an idea of like, okay, what's my average on this map? And then what's like a high roll, what's a low roll? And you really just want to go into a match expecting a mixture of each, right? You'll probably mostly get around your averages. You'll have a couple high rolls, you'll have a couple low rolls, and like that's just the reality of tournaments. Um, so I think just being okay with that and going into a match knowing what to expect is going to help a lot with the mental aspect of that.
Yeah. Um,
Cool. So I feel like we've been going kind of quick and I've been talking a lot, so I just want to make sure if you have any other questions or um, things that have come to mind as I've been going over this stuff. Feel free to interject.
Not really a question, but like I my expectations for myself are way too high.
Hmm.
Like I expect myself to play at like low 5-digit level,
Right.
which I do not.
Hmm. Yeah. So where does that expectation come from?
I have a lot of low 5-digit friends who I play with. Um, so when I play with them, we play like 6 stars and maybe 7 stars, depending.
Gotcha.
Um,
Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like that's mostly stemming from like comparison. Um,
yeah,
I think again, it's easier for me to sit here and just be like, don't compare yourself to your friends. But I think that if you just look at that as like motivation to say, oh, I want to get to that level. I'm not there right now, but I can, right? I can in the future. And the only thing between me right now, at the level I'm at and, the level that I want to be at is just a lot of time and practice. um, so, it's something that everyone goes through, right? I mean, no one just picks up the game and can play at a high level. So I think just, really being okay with that and trying to, like I said, cut yourself some slack. Because I think that the mental aspect of the game is like kind of overlooked by a lot of people. It's really important to just make sure. I mean, first of all, if you're not having fun, you're not going to get better. That seems to be like a universal truth with pretty much everyone that I've worked with. So if you get to the point where you're just getting really frustrated, you feel like you're not getting better, like that can kind of spiral into like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so at that point, I would say just take a break, take a couple weeks, maybe a month, like, and just, maybe you get on now and then and play a couple maps offline and, just for fun. But, just try to take some time to reset the mental if you need to. And I have definitely been there in my time playing this game. So, don't feel bad. I think that that's actually very beneficial.
right now my mental is not the best.
Yeah. And I do like I guess I just wonder why that is. I mean, looking at your profile, I mean, you're still pretty new, right? So I
Yeah,
think it's nothing to worry about. I mean, yeah, look at this. Like only 2 years. That is not a lot of time. I think that, if your goal is to get to a high level, you're really still like just at the start of your journey there. So just keep that in mind, I think. Um, but yeah. Okay, so let's talk about warm-ups really quick, because I did touch on that, you know, talking about having a consistent warm-up and playing the same maps. Um, so do you just let me read this. So do you have any sort of like, you know, couple maps that you like to play when you first get on?
Yeah. Let's see if I can find it. Uh, this map kind of warms my fingers up.
Okay.
Um, see that or uh, I warmed up on the Deceit for an hour. That was fun.
Wow.
No, it was pain. That
Yeah.
and maybe in my mechanics folder.
Yeah.
Uh, so like anything in here,
Okay.
but it's
Gotcha.
pretty much random.
Yeah. So I would definitely say, you know, something that I do, I have, I think my warm up routine is 7 maps. Um, and so I kind of like hit a different skill set with each map, for the first like 4 or 5 maps. And then after that, I just play like general high star rating mechanics. So, you know, things that are combining the stuff that I just warmed up. But I think it is good to, you know, maybe you get on, you start with an aim map. Like aim is something you feel like you're pretty good at, like you're comfortable with it. So, you know, get on, start with aim, warm up your right hand. Next map, maybe you go to some bursts, right? You know, 5 notes, 7 note. After that, your tapping hand's a little more warmed up. Now you go into some death streams, maybe. You know, Tower of Heaven is a great map for that. You know, really anything just around that range. Is probably going to be good. And then after that, you know, maybe you try putting DT on something like warm up your eyes, play something higher approach rate that's, you know, pretty challenging. And then after that, you know, maybe you just go to like general mechanics kind of stuff. Um, but I do think that there is value in playing the same maps. So, you know, that being said, like definitely change your warm up routine now and then so that you aren't just, you know, playing the same maps over and over for years. But I think that will really help you to just like I said, start from the same place every day and kind of just build up from there. Um, and I think in terms of difficulty, you probably want to pick stuff where, you know, like maybe if you were fully warmed up, you'd be able to maybe not FC it, but get a good run consistently. And so, you know, maybe you're gonna get a B rank or so, you know, as you're warming up, especially on the tapping stuff, because you know your left hand probably takes a little longer to warm up than your right hand if you're a good aim player. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think just, you know, something around that difficulty is usually going to be good, but make sure you pick songs that you like and that you're okay with listening to many times over. Because yeah, if you're going to be consistent with a warm up routine like that, you're going to be playing them every time you get on before you play anything else. Um, cool. Okay, so this is an interesting point that I see you bring up. You say you know you can't pick between being a streamer and aim player. Um, So I think that this is a very common thing that like when you focus on one skill set or the other one is going to feel like it's going to slip, right? Whatever you're not focusing on. And that really just comes from the fact that like you only have so much mental energy that you can devote to playing. And so you know you have to split that between your 2 hands, right? Your 2 hands are doing 2 different things, and so whichever one that you're focusing on more and maybe is more warmed up is just going to perform better. So I think that really the one that you want to be effortless is tapping, and that you know kind of comes back to that idea we were talking about earlier about learning how to subdivide, and just you know getting really comfortable, I guess, with a variety of different BPMs and just kind of like learning how it feels to play 150 BPM or 160 BPM streams, if that makes sense. Um, but you know, you used BTMC as an example. I've seen Ed play in person, and it's crazy to watch him because the streams again look totally effortless. Like he is not using any energy at all thinking about his tapping. It's all going into his aim, and that's why he's you know so good at space streams, right? Because he just doesn't even have to think about it. He just focuses entirely on the aim, and the tapping just kind of comes with that. Um, so I think that you know you want to get this sense of like unless there's some sort of mechanical bottleneck like you know not being fast enough or not having enough stamina, um, you just want to train yourself to feel like you're always tapping the rhythm kind of independent of what your aim is doing. Like whether or not you miss aim is completely irrelevant, but if you can just get the tapping and feel like you know you're following the rhythms and you're understanding the rhythms on you know whatever map you happen to be playing, and then your aim just kind of comes along secondary to that, I think that you'll have a lot more luck keeping them synced up. And hopefully, you'll just get more used to, like I said, how it feels to play different BPMs, and your tapping will become more effortless over time. And then, you'll have more energy to devote to your aim. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Cool.
So kind of focus on tapping more.
Yeah, I think, and right now, I mean, I think it's going to be good for you to just examine the maps that you're playing and say, like, like I said, is my tapping good enough to play these maps that I want to be playing right now? And if the answer is no, then you should hard focus tapping. But if the answer is yes, then work on your aim or work on other skill sets. Because if your tapping is good enough, then it's good enough. Don't worry about it until you need it to be better. Um, cool. So last couple questions. First of all, I don't think your sensitivity is bad. Watching your replays, it didn't look like you were having any trouble getting around the screen. I think that as you play harder and harder maps, you're probably going to maybe have to change your sensitivity a little bit. Like you might find that it's too low and you're not able to get quickly all the way across the screen. So don't be afraid to change it if you feel like you get to the point where it's too slow. But for right now, I mean, as long as it's comfortable, I think it's probably fine. I wouldn't worry too much about that. Um, and then in terms of playing high star rating maps, I mean, first of all, playing 6, 7 star maps right now for you, like I'm assuming it's probably only able to play like very aim focused 6 to 7 star maps, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that is totally fine if you are, continuing to try to push your aim skill cap, which you should be. But just, make sure that you're not hyper focusing on that and only playing super high starting stuff. Like you want to kind of go back and forth between, just like the top level that you can perform at in various different skill sets. So in aim, if that's 6 to 7 stars, great, continue pushing that. But if you're, only playing that and you're completely neglecting your speed, eventually you're going to want to be playing 7 star A maps that maybe have a, 200 BPM stream in it. And, now you're backtracking and coming back to like 4 or 5 star range to try to bring your tapping up to speed. So I think just, trying to find a nice balance between the two and alternate is going to be important. And one thing about that too is that I think a lot of the times, you might find that you get on and one of your hands is just like not cooperating for whatever reason, like maybe your tapping just feels really bad on a given day, maybe your aim feels bad, and that happens to everyone. So if that happens, use it as just an opportunity to work on the other thing, right? Try to be efficient with your time and don't try to force it if you're just having a bad tapping day, because like I said, that happens to everyone. So if you're having a bad tapping day, just work on something else. Cool. Yeah. So, any other specific questions about just, I mean, anything in general?
Not really.
Okay. Cool. In that case, I would like to give you a map to try. This is going to be very heavily leaning into kind of that finger control aspect. And you may want to use the OSU trainer to even slow it down a little bit more. Because I think that it's pretty tricky. But this song is very reliant on just maintaining a constant speed with your tapping, and there's a lot of cuts in the streams. So what I want you to do is just do your best to instead of changing the way you're tapping, try to emphasize the cuts with your aim and just keep your tapping steady.
Connection. Art and beat. Art and beat technology. Very popular. People loved it because art and beat. Art and beat technology. Very popular. People loved it. Paradise.
All good. That was a pretty good run for a sight read. So yeah, again, I think that was, you know, just really showing that tendency again of rushing as you coming off these sliders. So just really quick, I'll stream my game again and just show you in the editor. But so there's really no break in the rhythm, right? So these longer sliders, you know, value of 3 notes. Shorter ones have the value of 2 notes. Reverse sliders have the value of 3 notes. But there's no break in the rhythm at all. So this should feel, you know, very just consistent throughout the map. And you know, there's a handful of breaks in the rhythm, like right here. But for the most part, it's just going to be consistent throughout the entire map. So I think just this is going to be a great map to kind of start training that that subdivision that we were talking about earlier. So yeah, this map is awesome. I would also like to say, in terms of training, you know, streams and stamina, I really like to recommend that people try playing alt maps, just because alt maps are a great way for you to really start developing your flow aim without necessarily having to worry about like the stamina aspect of streams. So let's find a good one. Mycorrhiza is a classic. So yeah, I'll have you try this map. But yeah, this mapper PKK, I would definitely recommend just checking him out. He has a lot of maps that are very like entry level to alternating maps, and I think that, you know, there's a lot of benefit to playing stuff like this. Nice. Cool. Yeah, looks great. So yeah, definitely recommend just continuing to train that flow aim. And I think that that will kind of just take some of the strain off, once you start transitioning into more difficult streams. If your flow aim's already pretty good, then that's, just one less thing you have to worry about, right? And that's something you can start working on now. So cool. We've got a little less than 10 minutes left. I just wanted to make sure, if there were any other questions you had or things that you were hoping to cover that we haven't yet, now would be the time to bring that up.
Like mouse grip, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. How is your grip right now?
It's kind of like just laying my hand on top.
Okay.
I kind of use my thumb to snap on notes.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the big things about mouse grip is that I think as much as possible, you just really want to avoid tilting your mouse or angling it in any direction. That is usually going to make drift a lot worse if you're angling it. So as much as you can to just like keep it pretty straight as you're moving around, that's definitely one thing to keep in mind. Additionally, experimenting with your grip, you can look at one of the really cool things about playing mouse in OSU is that you can look at grips, from pro players from all kinds of different games, right? So you can look at like Counter-Strike pros, League pros, OSU, like whatever. So for my grip, personally, I kind of have like sort of the bottom of my palm is resting on the base of my mouse on the back, and then other than that, it's mostly fingertips that are in contact with the mouse. Um, so you can see how that feels. It's really going to depend on what mouse you're using as well as like how big your hands are, which grip is going to be the best. But I think usually like a claw fingertip hybrid, similar to what I'm doing, is usually going to lend itself the best, just because then you can have very stable arm motions and you can also like micro correct with your fingertips. Um, so that's something to keep in mind. Also, I think you want your grip to be relaxed if possible. Um, and I personally have grip tape on my mouse. So I know, I think it's called Lethal Gaming Gear. They make grips, designed for specific mice. That's a Model O that you're using, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think they should have grips for Model O. If that's something that you're interested in, I think it definitely helps a lot with, just like keeping your grip stable and not having it slide around. For me personally, my hands get really sweaty. So, having grip tape has really helped to counteract that. And it's pretty cheap too. So, maybe something that's worth looking into. Um, Other than that, I will also recommend, I have hyperglides on the bottom of my mouse. So they're just custom mouse feet. They're a little bit faster than the default mouse feet that came with mine. I have not really used the Model O, so I don't know how good the feet are. Um, but yeah, I mean, if you feel like your tracking is good, and your grip is consistent, then I wouldn't worry about modding your mouse too much. But if any of these things I'm describing you feel like are affecting you, definitely look into some of the mods that you can make for your mouse, or try a different mouse entirely.
Yeah, I was thinking of buying a new mouse.
Yeah,
The
which
G Pro Superlight.
okay, yeah, the Logitech G Pros are really popular, I know. And I can actually send you, if I can find it. Um, Give me one second here. Okay, I think it is this. Yeah. So this is just a really cool spreadsheet that was made, that kind of keeps track of like all the top mouse players and what stuff they're using, what their sensitivity is. So if this, helps you in your, just what you're deciding on what to get, um, yeah, I would definitely recommend looking through this if you have any questions about, sensitivity or just anything like that. I think that your sensitivity is pretty normal for, you're like right in the middle of the pack for averages. Maybe even a little bit lower sends than normal. But you can play with very low DPI. I play around 500. I'm on the lower end of the spectrum personally. And then I'll also send you, there is a mouse pad sheet as well. I think that having the right mouse pad is pretty important because they all feel different. They all track differently. So, probably not super important right now, but as you get better and start playing harder and harder maps, you may want to start thinking about which mouse pad you're using and how that compares, in terms of speed and friction and all that.
Yeah, I
So
just bought a
here's,
new one.
oh, okay.
It's the one I'm
Nice.
using right now.
Cool. Yeah. So,
It was way better than the other one I had, but
yeah. Yeah, that's good. So yeah, just kind of some resources for you to have. I think that these are good to just check every once in a while if you're looking for new peripherals. Um, but yeah, anyway, really quick, I'd just like to ask you a little bit about what your goals are. How what level are you trying to get to? Would you say?
I- probably 4 digit. My goal for
Okay.
this year is 5 digit by the end of the year,
Okay.
which I feel like I could hit.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. Um, I I would encourage you to also think about some goals in terms of like maps to play, things to FC, things to pass, really just anything like that. Because I think that the issue with rank milestones is that those goalposts are always moving, right? Like in order to rank up, you have to not only get better, but you have to get better faster than everyone else around you. Um, so I think
Yeah.
that, picking specific maps is nice to just have like very concrete things that you can work towards. And, if you have a map that you're working towards, you can start to break it down into like the various skills required to play it. So, just for example, if you want to be able to play sidetrack today, right? Like you need to be able to stream 190 BPM. You need to have good flow aim, able to hit those space streams. And you need to be consistent, right? Because, the way the game is with note lock, if you miss at all during some of those long streams, you're probably just going to fail instantly, right? So those are, some of those skills that you'd keep in mind, and then you can go work on each of those individually, and then eventually, try to put it all together and get that score that you set as a goal. Um, so yeah, just something to consider. I think that rank milestones are good too, but just consider finding maps and stuff to work towards as well.
Uh, I guess it isn't relevant, but my flow aim on relax is top tier.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
that's because I'm not tapping.
right. All that mental energy goes to aim. Yeah. Um, Yeah, I mean, I think that's common. I would honestly say like relax if you enjoy playing it, great by all means, but it's probably not going to help you get any better
Yeah,
because everything in the game requires you to use both hands. So anything where you're not using both hands is not going to translate very well. Um,
just
but
makes me feel like my tapping is holding me back.
yeah, um, like I said, that is common. I think the majority of people have just more natural aptitude for aim than tapping. I was certainly one of those people as well, and still am. So, I totally feel the struggle on that. But yeah, like I said, I think it's just going to be kind of checking in with yourself and saying like, how good does my tapping actually need to be for the things I'm playing? And past that, I wouldn't worry too much. So
Yeah,
cool. Well, anyway, I think that's about all the time we have. I hope that this was helpful for you.
yeah,
Um,
definitely.
Sweet. So I will go ahead and give you the reviews role in the OC University server. Obviously, totally optional if you want to write a review, but it does help us out. And
100%.
other cool. Other than that, I think I'm gonna get going. But I wish you the best of luck with your grind.
Thank you. Have a good luck in your future tournaments.
Thank you. You as well. All right. See ya.
See ya.